Hello and welcome to the League Community Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Scarzard Scarborough, and I have some experts, some reported experts here. We'll find out how expert they really are, to talk with me about the state of the game. This is March 2016 for all of you listening from the future. Joining me today, I have the, Lord of Gameplay, Lord of all Gameplay, I think it is, Andre Van Roon, also known as Meddler.
Hi, folks.
Yeah. We have Wesley Ruddle, also known as Smash Gizmo, also the best Falco at Riot Games.
Thank you, Patrick. That means a lot to me.
And then, of course, we have Aiden Zyrene Moon, known for his dancing skills and questionably sodium-tainted analytics. How are you doing, Aiden?
I love how the saltine thing is just catching on.
We just, yeah. Oh, wait, that's the thing. People call you saltine?
Saltine, yeah.
Ooh, okay. That's one of those where you feel sad you didn't make it up, right? You're just like, okay, that's quite good. So,
Less twitch.
So guys, like I said, we're talking about the state of the game, and I kind of want to focus this discussion on preseason to now, right? So that's patch 5.22 to 6.7, I think, is the one that's going to be coming out, assuming people are generally kind of aware of the stuff that's happening there. But yeah, so I guess general thoughts. How are we feeling about the game right now?
I'm starting to feel a little bit better about it. I had a couple patches where I was feeling pretty down on it. The last few are starting to make me turn up a bit. I think in particular, like nerfs to like ZZ Rot Portal and starting to like tune down some of the particularly uninteractive top laners have made me start to like the game a lot more than I was in like say 6.4 or 6.5. So yeah, I mean for me it's starting to get better, but it's been kind of ups and downs this season.
Yeah. So more interactive top lane. So I mean I know you play a lot of top.
Yeah.
Aiden, you primarily a jungler, at least when you want to win. How's jungling been? How's that felt like for you since the season began?
Jungling's kind of been all over the place, right? We had Runic Echoes introduced, and people started playing Gragas again. We got that back, and now people are playing Kindred with Devourer. So you have to really dabble in a whole bunch of different things and kind of flow with the meta. Warrior, I haven't really seen too many Warrior junglers. Like you might play like the really aggressive Lee Sin and stuff like that, but other than that, people are going like Cinderhulk, Sejuani now, and like the meta just keeps shifting every patch. That I'm trying to think of like what really has stuck the entire time. Because like Rek'Sai's fallen down tier list as well. Elise, I guess, has still been up there. But yeah, it's really about adaptability. And in terms of objectives, Dragon's still not really hitting the mark, in my opinion. Like I don't think it's something that people are going like really out of their way to contest. And unless it's like really far down in like the fourth Dragon place.
Right. Yeah, kind of like, yeah.
And Rift Herald's really interesting because some teams are prioritizing it more in esports and trying to use it because it's at least something that you have over your opponent on the map. But I don't know if that's even just where we want it to be just yet.
Right. And I mean, it does give gold, right? Which I think is the thing. It's like, even if I don't use the buff super well.
It's actually an interesting amount of gold, too, because it's just enough gold that if you allocate too many people to it, it's not worth it. So if you can get like your support and top laner to do it, or your support and jungler to do it in like a lane swap, then it's definitely worth it because your support's not going to be accruing any gold, right? So if you bring laners to it, so if you have like your mid laner and top laner doing it, well, they're actually missing enough CS that they go down in gold.
Yeah, this has actually been kind of interesting, and I think it's a good way to bring our conversation to the objectives, because I think that was one of the big things from preseason. We were like, we made a lot of changes to towers, and we made a lot of changes to, we introduced Rift Herald, right? That previously there was nothing, and now there is something. Andre, what's your thoughts on how Rift Herald has been playing out? Because I think my opinion, it feels a little bit like a math problem, right? It's like hard to know when I'm supposed to go for it or when I want it. I get really scared when I hear it screech from across the map and I know someone has it, but other than that, it's been a little hard for me to gauge the value. What do you think?
Yeah, we still really like the idea of Rift Herald as something you can contest without your entire team, particularly with your top laner or jungler plus one other. Don't overall feel it's entirely hit the mark in terms of worthwhile contesting. And as you say, clear enough when you should contest it in particular. So we're actually going to be making some changes to Rift Herald, to Dragon as well, and to a couple of other sort of smaller objectives, things like red and blue buff, and probably some tweaks to towers in a patch coming up in the middle of the year to sort of try and get some more focus back onto those.
Yeah, so I guess let's not talk around it. Let's actually contextualize that real quick. This is what we're calling it mid-season.
Yep.
Right.
So sort of aiming to do a mid-season probably in late May at a best guess. And that'll sort of be a miniature version of the preseason, not as sort of big and disruptive as those tend to be, but a bundling of a bunch of changes together. We've already talked about the mage updates, which will be sort of one of the big cornerstones in that. Our other big focus will be on some updates to those objectives.
Okay, so
In a lot of ways, this is like formalizing something that we've been doing at a lower scope for years now, which is like the break between competitive seasons. We take a little bit more liberty in terms of how we can balance the game. We feel like we can be a little bit more experimental because it won't necessarily, ruin people's jobs in the LCS, right? It's like we can
Thank you.
I actually like feel empowered to do bigger changes. But this year, like we're going gung ho with it, right? Like we're taking that to the next level and actually doing a lot of big changes all at once.
yeah, I mean, I think it's been exciting just to watch the process because it feels like I'll just say as a balance watcher, right? Like not just when I was working on design, but then in recent years as well. It feels like we will make a big shift or we'll make a big change, and then sometimes just let it sit for a while, and it feels like, oh well, maybe we wait until preseason to change the jungle, or maybe we wait until preseason, right? And that can be a really long time away, and so I don't know, having a defined space to really kind of shake things up seems neat. Aiden, how do you feel like this is going to work out, especially heading into what is it, best of twos, best of threes?
Yeah, best of threes here in NA, best of twos over in Europe because we.
Yeah,
hate
but NA
ties.
is I believe the only region, and the only language that we do anything in.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Work on it. So no. Tell me, what do you think about heading into mid-season, at least even being a thing? Do you think it's going to shake things up a lot?
Well, I think it's going to shake things up a lot, like Cinderhulk and Juggernaut updates did, like coming into Worlds, where people are going to have to figure out the meta and just adapt. I mean, League of Legends, been playing it for 6 years now, and it's still always fresh. And I absolutely love that we keep doing these things where we update it, and it feels like a different game, and you're playing different champions, and you're trying to learn new things, and you're playing against different champions. So it's constantly evolving, and I absolutely love that. So I think that this is something that is exciting for me from an esports perspective. I want to see what people catch on to and what they do with these new types of, if we're bringing out items, objectives, and stuff like that, and the tweaks and the champions. So I'm just overall really excited for it, and I don't know how much it's actually going to like affect best of twos and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because it's pretty much going to be the same type of game in a series where you like adapt to your opponents, pick up these new things. Outside of game, though, it's just going to change people's prep a little bit. Like, how much do we focus around Rift Herald? How much do we focus around Dragon? And, it's just going to become a different game. Just like when Dragon gave gold, everybody was like, we have to get the first Dragon or else we're 2,000 gold down and we can't do anything after
the
that.
snowball
point,
has
so.
already begun kind of at that point.
Yeah.
So we're talking a little bit about, the state of the game and things we like, but I want to kick it over to you, Wes, and I want to know, what are some things we feel like kind of haven't been the best, or things that haven't really worked out as well as we could have hoped? Right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll start by saying like the Rift Herald Dragon thing. Certain things about it are sort of working in terms of like Dragon feels like the long term, like late game thinking objective, and Rift Herald feels like the more immediate objective. But as a whole, like I think both of those are not getting enough attention right now, and so I think that hasn't really been working. But we've kind of been talking about that for a long time in this podcast, so I guess I'd move on to like I think that the game feels like a lot of the PvE elements are like a little bit off. So like ZZ Rot, Banner of Command, I think are playing up a lot and are contributing to really like low kill games where there's a lot of cerebral play around just the game being about taking the towers faster than the opponents rather than winning fights, and then the towers are a reward
killing
for
the
it.
man and then getting his towers.
Yeah, I personally, I think that's led to a bit staler of a game and less interesting of a game, and so to me, that's like the number one thing is just like our game is not bloody enough. You're not rewarded for taking aggression enough, and people are able to just kind of passively stall out and just force down turrets through attrition, which. I think it's okay if that's a niche strategy and you set up a big team comp for it, but it feels like it's happening every game right now. And I think that's like wider spread than we're used to, right? Like, again, sometimes it's a niche strategy. Sometimes we see it in pro play with like really dedicated poke comp setups where it's like force them to back and then take their tower. But it really feels like everywhere, like solo queue, pro games, everything feels a lot less bloody to me. So.
Yeah.
To me, that's the big thing.
Yeah. It's go ahead.
I was going to say, something I think ties in there is we're seeing a number of these sort of the mixed offense defense items actually just be too optimal a choice on too many characters.
Yes.
That's leading to a lot more sort of survivability on some of the dudes where the counterplay should be squishy and hard to kill.
Yep.
Again, also leading to some less bloody games, you know, sort of more Sterix and Titanic Hydra sort of being the big three on my mind.
Yeah.
Well, I actually want to give our players a lot of credit in this because everybody's trying to minimize risk and maximize reward simultaneously, right? If I'm Zed and taking Titanic Hydra, well, my counterplay, you know, bursting me and being able to catch me isn't as effective against me. Sure, I can't blow you up as hard, but it's definitely more risky for the other team to engage on you. And same with like building Maw and Sterix on like Kindred. So I think that these are really kind of
I think they're really smart plays on the
it's
players'
incredibly
part.
smart.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we saw when we introduced Rift Herald, where we were like, we want people to stop like dedicating only TP to top laners, and you can only take that up there. Like maybe we want to see a little more ignites up there. And, you know, maybe that didn't actually happen for us, but it was something where we're like, we want people to engage with each other more instead of engage with the objectives and try to kind of play the map in a way. But playing the map is the optimal way to play League of Legends. So people are catching on to that and learning that over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look.
I guess like they've been learning that for a long
Yeah.
time though, and one of the things that I think has really shifted this, like in not this patch but this preseason, this entire preseason is that or end season, is that the objectives that are kind of optimal to take are towers, which are very defensible, as opposed to ones like Dragon, where it's bloody team fights and it's like there is way higher risk involved in a dragon fight than in tower fights, and because of that, we're seeing again just less bloodiness, less fights in positions where it's actually even for the teams.
Yeah, exactly. And like the reward of taking a Dragon and Rift Herald versus taking a tower, well, tower is pretty much the highest tier right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I kind of want to go back to what you were saying, Andre. The mixed offensive defensive build. Wes has already heard an earful, but this is my biggest pet peeve in the game right now. I'm like playing full tank top lane Echo because I'm that scumbag. I love playing the champion, and I'm just like, all right, let me build all my AP, and then
It's pretty good right now.
yeah. Oh, it is quite good, and that's kind of what upsets me a little bit. Is I love dealing damage. I love killing people. And I found out the other people aren't dying, so I'm building their items, and then we're just grouping and we're kind of forcing down towers. It feels real good when I'm the one, you know, with an enormous shield and kind of just base damaging the hell out of the other guy. But to me, a little bit of my crusade has been around keystones. Actually, like I think Grasp is a little out of line, and I gotta say, it feels like the impact that the Keystone Masteries have had on our game's balance is actually maybe a little like undersold. I think right now, at least in the minds of players.
Yeah, I think they've actually been pretty meaningful overall.
Yeah,
And I'm really happy we're no longer in sort of, you know, League of Thunderlords, everybody using the same one.
Of
We're seeing some
course.
great variety. I do suspect we've got a bit too much sustain coming from them, though. In particular, there are so many different sustain options, you know, in multiple trees that you can stack together, which is sort of, I think, warping top lane especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now we're seeing like number one win rate right now on the 29th is Rammus top, because before he didn't have sustain, and sustain was something that people back in the Renekton days really needed to survive in that lane.
Yeah.
And now he's just a monster that stays there the entire game, and Grasp helps you scale because it affects your damage as well and rewards you for building HP. So honestly, Grasp is kind of deceptive, and like you were saying, it's making all these champions that maybe wouldn't be able to live in the top lane in a world that didn't have Grasp, now they're top tier.
Yeah.
Right. So what would happen if we kind of nerfed Grasp? Maybe even like, what if we took it away for a second? What would that look like in comparison?
Yeah, and this is, you know, I kind of want to say as much as I'll rip my hair out at this exact thing, I'm with you, Andre. I actually think Keystones have been really cool. I just find it's like I love Fervor, big Aatrox player, so I love just like diving in and then getting my crazy on hits going. I think Warlords has actually been a really cool addition. I know we're doing some changes to that, I think, right now, but it's more that I feel like the differences between if you're a champion that feels like you have a keystone that's kind of works with you versus when you don't and you feel like, oh, I'm kind of getting reduced benefit, like I guess I'll get Thunderlords because I don't have anything made for me. That still feels like a pretty drastic hole in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I've been playing a lot of Gnar recently, and I just take Thunderlords because I don't know what else I can feel good about. I'm ranged, so I feel worse about Grasp. I'm a laner, so Strength of Ages is less good. Like, he doesn't have any great synergies with anything else, so it's just like, well, I guess you take Thunderlords, right? That's and that feels like kind of a hole for the character right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at some point I'd love to sort of see us flesh out the Keystone Masteries a little more. Get another option, ideally get another sort of tier 3 option into each of those trees to serve those sort of nudes, the ones that don't feel they have something that really sort of amplifies their playstyle.
Yeah, I think that the example of Gnar that you were using, I think that he's definitely a situational kind of keystone selector. Because if you're going to build like Frozen Mallet and you're up against somebody who's pretty much the tank of the top lane right now, like a Rammus, you're going to like take Fervor and try to chip him down and chase him down and stuff. And if you're against somebody else who's ranged, then you take Thunderlords or maybe even Grasp. So there are those champions that have kind of a nebulous selection. And there's ones like Nasus where you're like, I really have no clue what to take. And then they can even take like Storm Raiders, right? So
That's the answer, though.
I know, that is the answer.
That's the answer in my
That is the
heart,
answer.
is take Storm Raiders on Nasus.
So it just ends up in this place where do we really want each champion to have like an optimal, just 100% this is the keystone you take? Or do we want it to be like more like the Gnar, more like the Nasus, where you can actually have a little more flavor to it? Because in a way, all of them are not fantastic for you, but none of them are really bad for you.
Yeah, I actually think Gnar is a pretty good example there of, has choice, has options that feel at least reasonable. I worry a bit about champions that have nothing that feels particularly good at a baseline. So it's more giving a champion at least one thing that feels decent,
Yeah.
rather than a one thing that is must pick.
Like who?
Zillion.
Zillion.
Galio.
Hmm.
I feel good about nothing on Galio.
Shout outs to Wes and I for playing the characters that no one else plays right now. It's actually interesting that you bring that up, Aiden. I know we're going a little bit deep on masteries here, but I kind of hadn't considered it that way. That it's how do we feel about like should a champion's performance be tied to a keystone or something? I think it feels. I've kind of never seen it that way, right? It's like if there was a character that only could get Storm Raider Surge because the value was too good, right?
Yeah, it's like Rammus with Grasp, right?
Right, or something. It's like I wouldn't see that as like, oh no, I don't have diversity. I'd be like, oh cool, it's helping me do the thing I already want to do. That said, I mean, we have a pretty big game. I could totally see that being the case.
Or it's covering your weakness of like not having sustain in lane, right? So it's actually allowing you to kind of pass one of your weaknesses early game. It's like that's something that Warlords is now doing for a lot of AD carries. So like poke wars in the bottom, it's kind of more people are going after supports now as opposed to AD carries in trades because they're just like, well, he's got Warlords, he's going to sustain up, right?
sticks.
Yeah, it's just kind of heal up,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to move on to something
strange
else. It's definitely been, but I will say I love a lot of that actually. I think I'm kind of with you now, Wes. I feel really good about our game right now just because even though I may not be doing everything optimally, I feel like there's more room to kind of read between the lines and come up with different builds or play things in a different way. Maybe Death's Dance is just broken, but like it's entirely possible. But I kind of love finding things like that to kind of mix and match.
Did Wes say he felt really good about the game, or did you just say you felt less bad?
I feel less bad.
Okay.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's
I think, yeah. I mean, I guess again, I feel a lot better than I used to, but I would still say that like there feel like there are a lot of outstanding issues still, right? And you and I as top laners, right? Like everyone builds Iceborne Gauntlet, Sunfire Cape, Spirit Visage. Those are your first 3 items. If you're playing top lane and you're not Graves, those are your first 3 items.
Yeah, generally
right?
speaking. Yeah.
So it just it feels off to me that something like that can go on. And also I think like right now we're seeing like a lack of like the diving fighter type guys too, right? Like Pantheon is like okay, but like then you go down the list and you're like, okay,
Jarvan,
Xin Zhao,
Vi.
Aatrox, Vi, yeah.
Nocturne, yeah.
Yeah. All those guys
We've seen those dudes be pretty effective from the jungle, by contrast.
Yeah, somewhat, right? Most of the time they're building super offensive from what we've seen. And it doesn't seem like you see any of the builds where it's like Triforce into tank, right? Like, or like one offensive item tank used to be a thing that people did.
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to distinguish between the Xin Zhao that murders everybody on your team with Devourer Rage Blade.
right.
That
And
dude's doing okay.
that guy's doing okay.
Versus the
People out
the
there who are listening are like, Wes, I have seen that one a lot. I've seen it.
versus the Jarvan top lane who is probably struggling more than he should.
Sure.
Yeah. That said, I don't know. I did get crushed by a full AD Jarvan recently. That he got a triple kill with his ultimate.
Oh.
Now that it is AoE, I was hurting inside. I didn't want to lose the LP, but I was proud of him. I was like, thank you for doing.
Thank you for going hard. Yeah.
I was too much of a coward to pick this thing. You mentioned Graves, which I think highlights kind of an interesting thing. I mean, we've talked about Masteries a bit. We've talked a little bit about Rift Herald, but I mean that's kind of almost the last outstanding thing from preseason, right? We updated a lot of these marksmen. We changed around items quite a bit, and now it feels like, from my read, it feels like marksmen are doing pretty well, but we're actually just kind of seeing them everywhere, right? Marksman jungle, marksman top lane, marksman mid lane, Graves everywhere, Graves everywhere.
Graves support's great. Love it.
Yeah, I did. That's the first ranked game I ever won in season 2 was on support Graves.
Interesting.
I maxed my smoke screen.
How many
Very
support Graves
interesting.
games did you lose before you won one?
Look, I got so lucky on the first one, I was kind of out after that. I was like, clearly the gods have blessed me. But I mean, so how do we feel about seeing more marksman teams, right? It feels like in pro play as well, right? It's you double AD quite a lot of the time in some form or another.
I think I'd be happier with them if we didn't have items like Phantom Dancer and Death's Dance and Sterak's and Maw, because I see so many games now where I think a great example of this was when I believe it was Immortals played Cloud9, and Wild Turtle was able to just build last item Maw, and you can't kill him at that point because he's just got Maw, Sterak's, he's Callista, he's life-stealing, double life-steal with Runaan's, and there's absolutely no way to kill him with the team that had been selected. So these are things where I think where we have AD carries with too much survivability, and AD carries by design we're supposed to have less survivability. And I think Graves with his quick draw is a big offender of this. That thing has so much armor and magic resistance on it, and it's pretty much hidden power that people aren't really respecting.
I believe it is 120 at max stat. Is what you can get that up to.
At max rank.
Yes.
120 armor and magic resist.
Yes.
Yeah, it's,
And it can stay up the whole time.
at least one person out there just spit out their water.
Yeah.
But it's just like, what? You said it was 40. Yeah, it stacks. I'm sorry. It's the rest of the sentence. I
So
apologize.
I guess getting down to the meat of it, they survive a little bit too much. And if that wasn't the case, I'd actually be kind of happy with it. I think that it promotes people playing things like Lysandra. I think that tanks with pick like Nautilus become more effective. And with backline access, it becomes more desirable. So we've seen Quinn top. We've seen Graves top. We've seen these guys in the jungle. We've seen mid Corki. We've seen mid Graves. So I think that the diversity that we're seeing there is great because now Zed's back, right? And he can kill these guys in the mid lane. So honestly, I think that this keeps the kind of the rock, paper, scissors of our game to continue evolving because people are like, okay, I picked the Corki. What's the answer to that? All right, that's the Zed. And then people are like, well, what's the answer to the Zed? How do I counter that? And it keeps people thinking and it keeps them on their toes. So I like the evolution because it's something we haven't really had except for like season 1 where people are like mid lane Ashe. So I think it's fun.
I'm really happy to see the variety between different marksmen we're seeing. They're doing different things. They're playing in different ways, which was one of our big goals there. I do think we've got some individual characters, sort of Quinn Graves and Corki, who are just a bit too universally good in multiple places. That we need to bring a bit more in line. It also feels a little bit unfair if you're not a marksman player that bot lane usually, or at least that duo lane, is locked to a marksman slot there with support. And at the same time as we've got some more marksmen into other positions, that we'd get a lot of value from getting some other characters into the bot lane. So if you're running Corki mid or Graves top or whatever it be, cool. Can you get a mage down in there, farming with the support, that sort of thing?
Mordekaiser. Give me more Mordekaiser.
So
I'm like the one player that
I sort of
out there
love
that
the
loves Mordekaiser.
variety Mordekaiser gives to games, but I think he feels like a really forced way of doing it.
Yeah.
You have to go there because your W tells you to, as opposed to, hey, if you're a mage player and you want a duo lane, here are some items that'll make sense for you. Here are some Keystone Masteries that'll support that. Here's a way you can be that tower killer for your team, that sort of thing.
You talked about being able to kind of flex things in Champion Select. I think we're seeing more flex picks than ever right now, and people are being able to play things in so many different lanes. I've heard stories about in scrims, because in LCS, we lock it in at 20 seconds, and that's what your picks are. That's the order they're in.
Yeah.
People are swapping just to counter back and forth. So it's like, is that Lysandra mid or Graves top? And then, like, what do they want to play it into? Because people were flexing, like, Nautilus top, Nautilus mid. So, like, they're just going back and forth, like, which one? And they just kept doing that over and over again. Because we're seeing so much of that now.
I'll say that's one thing about this season that I really like in particular, especially in the playing against case, right? Which is, it feels weird to say, but last night it was the enemy picked Nautilus, Trundle, and Graves. and we didn't really know. We were like, oh, okay. And I'm last pick top lane, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know who's going in which position. I don't know how to tell. And I was actually like, I'm looking at all my room pages. I'm like, okay, well, I would want to pick this character in this thing if it's Trundle, but I don't want to do that if it's Graves, right? And then I ended up trying to go for one. And I completely guessed wrong. It was Trundle, and I got smashed. And I was like, you know what? That was actually kind of cool. Like it was really, and it was really smart on them to kind of work together to figure that stuff out. I think let's if we do end of the year or sometime in the future get a mage in there. I'm down for the mind games to keep going.
All right,
I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I kind of want to jump back on the conversation of having like a mage in the bot lane, right? Because we've seen Nautilus mid, we've seen tanks in the mid lane now. Because when they're really too powerful, they can go anywhere. We're seeing the AD carries in different positions, and I think in professional play, it's different than in solo queue, because in solo queue, when I queue up, I consider myself mainly a tank player, right? I'm going to play a tank top or I'm going to play a tank jungle. And that's really like you define yourself by lanes and a style, whereas I know people who play burst mages, whether they're playing top support, sometimes they'll play Zyra, or they play mid lane. And then it wouldn't really be so much I'm an AD carry player or a marksman player that will now transition towards playing mages on the AD carry role. It's going to be I'm an AD carry player and I'll play AD carry bottom, mid, or top. Or I'm a mage player who mained mid before, but I'll play in that bot lane if I want to. And in professional play, that's going to be kind of different, because it's going to be those players are locked into those roles. You're not really going to have your AD carry player and your mid player actually swap positions. You do it in game at that point, right? We'd still call you the mid laner. We'd still call you the top laner.
Yeah.
So it actually sits in a very strange place where we haven't really done anything to this level with the bot lane before, because that's been the lane that's been support AD carry for a long time now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see, because I think when we were working on Mordekaiser, right, we almost kind of didn't know if teams were really gonna take hold of it, and because there was the issue of they were qualifying on a patch where they couldn't play Mordekaiser, right? And then it's like, okay, well, Reckless and Sneaky and Wild Turtle seem to be really taking to it immediately, but some other people weren't really taking to it, and so in the end, the character was too powerful, right? But you had some teams that were banning it because they just couldn't play it themselves. They didn't really know how to, and I do imagine what a world looks like in the future, where it's something like, well, what if we just had our tank player or our mage player do that, and you just take your role somewhere else? Like, does it, does Doublelift always play in a duo lane?
I actually think we sort of saw this years ago when Assassins first started to be a big deal mid lane. We saw professional play shift from a mid lane as a mage player to
it used to be called the AP carry,
exactly,
right?
Can your mid laner play an assassin? To nowadays, where if your mid laner can't play assassins, you probably don't have a mid laner.
Yeah, right.
I think every role outside of marksman, or every position, I should say, outside of marksman has this expectation already, especially at the professional level. If you're a top laner, you're expected to be able to play, Scion, you're supposed to play Lulu, you're supposed to play, right? Like, you're supposed to have a broad range of characters that you can play. Same is true of mid, same is true of most junglers and supports as well. And marksman's the one where it's like, they all fall pretty neatly within deal a lot of damage at 550 or more range with their auto attacks, right? Yeah. And so if we start getting more diversity there, I imagine pros would adapt. They always adapt. And so I think that, we've seen that, over and over again in pro play.
Especially for Huni. You'll just...
you'll just murder everyone.
It's just get the magic 8 ball of Champ Select and just what is it? Top lane Callista? You got it, buddy.
I mean, he wanted to change to AD carry when he first came over here, remember?
Oh, no, I did not know about that.
Yeah, he did. He wanted to change to AD carry, and then Rainover was like, no. And so their coach is like, hey, Graves is good.
There you go. Okay, well...
the dream is happening.
Well, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So, let's focus a little bit more of the conversation on the today game, right? Like the right now, because I think we have a good view of like how things have kind of been going. What are the problems that we see with the game that are really unsolved as of right now? I know we were talking a little bit about tank itemization kind of in the top lane and some homogeny there. I know one that has been an ongoing conversation is what the state of movement speed in our game is, right? It feels like it's a couple patches ago, it felt like it hit the the peak,
Yeah,
right? Where you have-
boiling point.
yeah. Thank you. You've the
There
thing
we
I'm looking
go,
for.
yeah.
The
Swifties,
boiling
Alacrity,
point. Swifties, Alacrity,
Runic
Runic Echoes
Echoes,
giving 10% or
CZ,
something.
yeah.
Is that something that we're worried about moving forward? Is that going to be an issue?
I mean, we keep muting it, so yeah, for sure. There are a lot of things in our game that are tuned around what we expect characters' movement speed to look like. For instance, like skill shot hitability is like the most standard thing that you can think
Size
of
of
there.
the map.
Yeah, size of the
timers.
map, death timers, everything, right? Like that impacts so many things about League of Legends, and it's probably in our best interest to keep that within, certain bounds. And so, we nerf the movement speed on Runic Echoes. We probably will have to continue to nerf the movement speed that people can get from items, just because when it hits that boiling point, right, it's just like, well, you can't catch Udyr ever, and he's
Yeah.
on all three of your lanes at once, and it's just like,
or
we've
like
seen what it happens.
or like Cocoon ceases to be a skill shot because the speed at which Elise can close on you is like more than you could expect a realistic champion to be able to hit at that point.
Yeah, and we're seeing like Dead Man's played as well on people like Elise. And I think the big thing about movement speed isn't the fact that it exists in our game in just like large quantities. It's just how much is it accessible to people, because it's all relative, right? If I don't have Swifties and he does, then he's going to catch me. Even if it's like just a 40 difference, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh,
And that's what people
given
really
enough
care
time
about,
and enough
right?
space, right? The person will catch
Right,
up
like
to you.
I'm not really concerned too much about like the size of the map and stuff like that. It's more of like the relative movement speed of people compared to each other and how accessible it is to them. Because we see people like Elise who could get like 2-3 items that had so much movement speed on them, and then she's just like running around and her spider form had more movement speed on it. So it's like
Yeah, I
those
think
are the big problem
stacking
cases,
especially
right?
has been problematic.
Yeah.
I think overall, I do think excessive movement speed does impose quite a high cost on our game.
Mhm.
There is one benefit I'd call out in that it can narrow the difference between characters with sort of dashes or blinks and those without.
Yeah.
And historically, we have seen characters without those effects sort of really struggle to compete.
Yeah.
And access to items like Dead Man's Plate or Boots of Swiftness or Runic Echoes has empowered a bunch of champions that have previously really struggled, and that has been cool as a benefit.
Yeah, you actually called out. You skimmed over it, but I want to refocus it. You mentioned we're talking about move speed being a kind of nuanced thing that can subtly affect the outcome of a lot of fights. Something that is not so subtly settled the outcome of a lot of games is those death timers you're talking about, right? We made some changes. I looked it up today. It was 5:23 was making people stay dead for longer during the mid game, right? You're fine in the beginning and you're fine at the end in terms of what people used to be aware of, but it feels like it's deciding a lot of games right now. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that?
I'd agree it's deciding a bunch of games. To some degree, that's desired and intended. We do want particularly sort of mid-game fights to have some decent significance to them in terms of ability to take objectives after a fight. And the addition of Home Guard has also given defenders a lot more ability to get back into the fray, so some degree of death timer offset. Sorry, universal Home Guard, I should say.
Yeah.
Having said that, we are also seeing a few too many games where team wins a single fight, cleans up an entire lane of towers, and the Nexus towers and the Nexus. We're going to be looking to some death timer changes to target sort of that 30 to 45 minute period in particular.
So 5-second death timers, and home guards on at minute 10.
Yep, and
That should
no
be
cooldown on teleport.
special game mode. Special game mode.
Right.
Yep, it's called Never Ends.
Yeah. I mean, the tricky thing there, right, is that this is actually a really complicated math problem with tower durability, death timers. Like, also a lot of it's about like how far the map has already progressed and where the team fights are happening, right? Like, part of it's the team fights are happening on towers rather than at Dragon, and so that 10 seconds to get there is also offset. So it's just like there's a lot of stuff that's making it so that when 2 or 3 people roll over and get hit by a light binding and then die, right? Like you just lose the game. There are a lot of things that are different about that scenario now than there were like a year and a half ago. So, we are keeping an eye on it and we're trying to like lightly tune things all the time and, hopefully be able to make some bigger strides in the mid-season on that. But, that is something that is on our minds is like the higher level problem, which is like games are ending too fast and like, on people rolling through 3 towers all at once rather than, the game slowly progresses, or not slowly progresses towards this, but like having
Gradually
distinct
progresses.
phases, right?
Yeah.
I mean, games ending too fast or too suddenly?
Too suddenly, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah, that's-
suddenly is a better word.
Yeah, suddenly for sure. Because games ending too fast. I mean, we're moving to BO3s, man. I can't do that. 3 hour long games in a row.
Yeah,
Please,
the
please.
80 minutes to dream times
Yeah.
3.
But I actually want to look back to why we even did this in the first place, right? Why did we increase death timers and decrease how effective towers were? It was mostly because we were seeing things like Gragas, like Ziggs being able to stall a whole game out, and Azir as well, right? And now when we see those champions, they aren't as oppressive because we've taken a lot of the kind of accessibility to defense away from defenders, or I guess the strength of their defense, right? It's much harder to break a siege now, in my opinion, because the threat of a dive is much higher and it's much easier to do.
Yeah, I think it sounds almost as if the things we're describing, it's almost like they're all linked in some way.
Yeah.
Because it's like towers are definitely weaker, right? But
Yeah.
when you take champions like Alistar, right? Or you take almost every top laner and you outfit them with the most durable combination of items that you can get for the cheapest amount of gold, I think that is a thing that says, right? Where in the past, it's like, okay, Azir's taking over that mid lane. That tower's not going to die if I get up to it, and I have no one on my team that can pose a threat to it. Now, it kind of feels like we're almost now seeing the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why we call it balance, right? You're going to swing one way, the other, you're going to try to go back and forth and find that happy medium and eventually find a place where it's like, this feels really good. And we sit there and say, okay, but we're never really completely complacent with these things. And we'll be like, okay, how can we make this more interesting and upset the balance in a way? Like, I feel like we do that a lot where we're just like, this is too stagnant now. Let's shake it up.
Yeah, we don't want to knee jerk, certainly. The other thing, as you touched on there, Patrick, it's not just death timers that are causing a lot of the things people are observing. There's sort of a really easy thing to point to as those are long, therefore X, Y, and Z.
Right. I
But
saw
there's
the
a-
number 50 as they took the Nexus. Therefore,
Exactly.
that is the only problem here.
But I'm also, even if I'm respawning slow, I'm getting back into the fight quicker.
Right.
Or other stuff, strength of Baron buff and so on. There's a lot of, as you say, interlocking pieces, and reacting too heavily to just death timers, therefore doesn't seem like the correct solution to fix the specific problems we're seeing.
Right. So before we wrap up and we head out of here, I kind of want to get your sense on. We talked a little bit about midseason, but what are kind of our bets moving forward? What are some things that you would like to see more personally, or things that you think the team is really looking for to say that, like, we could come back in a couple months and be like, this is better, or this has progressed, or something like that. How do you feel?
For me, we've actually touched on most of the really big ones. Seeing early conflict over neutral objectives, I think, would be huge, both in terms of more interesting early games and really sort of restoring some meaning to those objectives. Long term, the major stuff we've already talked about, opening up the duo lane, just as a sort of huge source of extra variety game to game.
Right. Wes, do you have any bets moving forward?
So for bets, I don't know. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's. I feel like I'm flubbing here real hard.
A wish list, maybe?
Wish list for
Pantheon
me
buffs.
is Pantheon buffs are always on the wish list. In terms of bets, I think that objectives are always going to be what it comes back to, objectives and pacing. Like we keep coming back to it, and there's a reason. I just think that that is one of the biggest things that we need to work out, and it would just feel better for everyone if we can get that into a happy spot.
I see. Aiden, do you feel the same way about objectives? Do you have anything else you want to see?
Make Jarvan great again.
Yeah, hashtag make Jarvan great again.
Please.
Yeah, I was gonna say is if Grasp the Undying gets nerfed in the next 3 patches, this will be my favorite time playing League of Legends since launch. Echo's good, Scion's good, Kha'Zix is good, no one bans Alawi.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm higher rated than Smash Gizmo.
It's the golden age.
I don't stop reminding him. It's really a fantastic day to be a League of Legends player, I have to say. No, but I appreciate you guys coming out and taking the time and talking with me and the rest of us. Us being the nebulous voice that I give to the people that live inside my head, about League of Legends and the balance within. We'll definitely check back in a couple months with any of you if you want to, and talk about that. So for any of you out there who were listening to this, Please like, comment, and subscribe. Give us your firstborn, get a tattoo of the names of the people in this podcast. Whatever you do when you finish listening to one of these. But seriously, leave us comments. Let us know how we're doing and ways that we can improve and make this a better experience for you. So that's, I think something else, I don't know. I forgot. I was going to say...